Agentic Testing Quick Start Guide. In this guide, we're going to quickly walk you through the 4-step process for building test automation frameworks with the PRP system. We'll start with an idea based around building a Playwright framework. We'll create the PRD, which is the product requirements document. From that, we'll create the product requirements prompts, which are the prompts for your agentic coding tool. And then we'll run the PRP execute command, which goes away and builds the whole framework and the initial tests. Once you've signed up for the course, you'll find the instructions section gives you a quick start guide. And that guide, when you open it, is a one-pager that steps you through all of the 4 key steps, gives you links to all of the prerequisites you need and the course GitHub repository. So you'll find in there the links to Claude Code, so you can install Claude Code, Node.js, which you'll need, Git, Visual Studio, and then the GitHub repo where you can download and clone the course code from. Now, whilst we go into detail in the setup guide of the course on configuring and setting up Claude Code, you will need a Claude Code account. So you will need to set up either an API account or a Claude Code Max plan. And once you've set one of those up, you will then have to start Claude Code with the login switch. And at that point, it will give you the option to proceed with either your Claude Code Pro or Max account or the API account that you've set up, and then you'll be asked to log in. All of this is listed in far more detail in the setup part of the course. Once you've signed up for the course, it will step you through all of this installation. For now though, let's assume that you've got Claude Code set up, and from here we can start Visual Studio Code and clone the repository. So first thing you need to do before you do anything is clone the repository. So I've got a temp directory here. I'm going to go to the repository, copy the link for the clone, and then we can do git clone and the URL to the repository. Once that's cloned, we can change directory to at-course, which is the name of the repository. We can do a quick dir. And the other bit you really need to do is switch to the starting point for lesson 1 in module. Starting point for lesson 1 in module 1. So there is a branch in that repository, and you can do a git switch to start point module 1 dash lesson 1. Okay, and then dir on that. You're at the starting point, so that we can now continue through those 4 steps. So step 1 then is we work with an idea, and that idea, if we start Visual Studio, so I do code dot start Visual Studio, in that directory, what you'll find in that directory is an idea.md markdown file, and that documents what we want. It's a high-level concept. We want to create a Playwright project for a particular application, and then there's a few instructions in there. So that's step 1, the idea. Step 2 is the PRD create. So from the idea, we want to create a product requirements document. So in Visual Studio Code, you can go to View, and if you go to Terminal, and it doesn't matter what kind of terminal you've got, I tend to prefer Git Bash. So if I go to Git Bash, I can start Claude Code in this directory, and we have a number of Claude Code commands pre-configured in this repository or this code base. And one of those is the PRP planning create. So it takes an idea, that idea, and creates the product requirements document. So you can use /PRP planning create, and then you pass in the idea file. So we'll copy the relative path for that, paste that in there, and Claude Code will go off and create our PRP planning document. This might take some time, and you may have to answer a few questions that Claude Code will prompt you with, but once that's complete, we'll come back in 5 minutes and move on to step 2. So after 5 or so minutes, Claude Code's come back to me and said it's ready to create the Playwright testing prd.md document. Your naming convention might be slightly different depending on what mood Claude's in. I'll click yes, and under the PRPs folder you will see a Playwright testing PRD document. And my advice is to scan through this, check it, update it, modify it, correct anything. But it is a comprehensive document that defines the requirements for your TypeScript Playwright project. So that's step 2 completed. Step 3 then is to create the product requirements document from the PRD. So the second command we have in here is the PRP Playwright TypeScript create command. So you can use the / command again, PRP create. And in there we pass in the name of our requirements document, copy relative path, paste that in there. And then we leave Claude Code to go away and create the PRP document after doing a load of research and using one of the templates in here as a basis for that PRP document. Again, you may be prompted at certain points for confirmation that Claude Code can go off and do research or other various questions. I'll select yes on that and leave Claude Code to finish the research before it creates the PRP document. So at the end of that process, Claude Code prompts me to say it's ready to write the to create some auxiliary documentation to do with coding patterns for checkboxes, which is what that initial set of test cases are going to be. It'll create that document and then follow up with the actual Playwright testing PRP.md document. So at the end of that process, you'll find, once you accept Claude Code's request to write the document, a Playwright checkbox testing.prp document. And this is the full detailed product requirement prompts that we can then use with Claude Code to actually write the code for our framework and initial tests. This is a really detailed document with the file structure, page object model examples, gotchas to do with checkbox testing. Now you can review this, scan it, update it, modify it, correct anything that you find needs changing. But for the purpose of just this initial example, I'm going to accept everything that is detailed in that document, and we can move on to the final step, step 3. So in step 3 then, we want to run the PRP execute document, and the input for that command is the PRP document that we've just created. So what we'll do now is use the PRP Playwright TypeScript execute command. So that's / command PRP again, this time with the execute, and the argument to that is the PRP document, the product requirement prompts document that we've just created. And again, when I start that off, we may get prompted to answer a few questions in order to continue, but we'll leave that running for 10 minutes or so, and when we come back we should have our fully written Playwright framework for our application under test. So towards the end of step 3 then, you'll start to see Claude Code asking you if it's okay to create README documents, etc. And you'll start to see the Playwright tests folder fill out with all of the page object models, the fixtures, the tests, and all the utilities it needs. I'll accept the last few responses to questions from Claude, and at this point we're ready to move on from the final stage and let Claude Code start to test and debug the scenarios that it's created. And you can see here that in a headless mode that Claude Code is starting to run those tests, and any second now we should get a test report out, and then we can ask Claude Code to run it in headed mode just to confirm that we can see the tests running in a browser. So one final tip, the application we're using to test in this example project sometimes does run a little bit slowly, so you can, if you think Claude Code is struggling to get these last tests working, you can add a command like please bear in mind that the website under test is running slowly, and that way Claude Code will adjust some of the timings and make sure that it's configuring its test run to accommodate that. And there we go. After a few minutes of back and forth with Claude Code trying to debug those tests, it will hopefully come back and say that it's passed all the tests on the 3 browsers. And voila, here we go. Claude Code has completed the first initial run, and we've got headed mode test execution complete. We've run in 3 different browser types. All 8 main checkbox tests work. The 3 smoke tests work in Firefox and in WebKit. And we're now ready to either start building out our framework, adding more tests, or continuing to create some of the documentation. I like to create readmes, architecture documents, and getting started documents, which we'll look at in some of the upcoming lessons in this module.